and welcome back to the channel, my friends. I'm back in my home studio, and let us talk about the Saudi Arabia talks more in this part of the video. This week, all eyes are on Saudi Arabia, and the US and Russia prepare for crucial negotiations there, or as the United States says, consultations before real negotiations. But where does Ukraine stand in all of this? Let's find out. In a surprising turn of events, US President Donald Trump announced that American and Russian officials would meet in Saudi Arabia to discuss war resolution. Trump even suggested that Ukraine would be involved. However, Ukrainian officials quickly denied any participation with President Zelenskyy in Saudi Arabia, making it clear that Kyiv has no plans to negotiate under these circumstances yet. And during an online press conference from Abu Dhabi, Volodymyr Zelenskyy reaffirmed that Ukraine will not recognize any agreements made without its direct participation. Kyiv's stance remains firm: no territorial concessions, no negotiations without Ukraine about Ukraine. The US delegation will include Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. On the Russian side, probably Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov will lead discussions. Any Ukrainian representation is absent from this list, and that's logical. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made it clear there will be no sort of territorial concessions to Ukraine in a loud statement just before these consultations. Moscow continues to insist that Ukrainian forces must withdraw from occupied regions for any peace deal to move forward. Meanwhile, Russia has dismissed European involvement in these talks. Trump, who once claimed he could end the war in one day, has shifted it to a 100-day period plan, as reports. He strategically included a controversial proposal, a $500 million or $500 billion deal with Ukraine in exchange for security guarantees and access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals and gas reserves. Zelenskyy, while open to economic cooperation, refused to sign the first draft of the deal due to lack of concrete security assurances, according to Ukrainian sources, and right now the deal is being considered on the American side. For now, the US and Russia will meet bilaterally in Saudi Arabia, while Ukraine meets with United Arab Emirates representatives in Abu Dhabi. Followed by a separate Ukraine-US meeting. The joint negotiation may follow, but Ukraine's participation remains still uncertain. The global stakes are high, and the outcomes of these talks could reshape the future of our entire continent and the Ukraine-Russian war at all. What do you think about this, and will these negotiations bring a real, long-lasting peace, or they will lead to some kind of ceasefire for several months, maybe a year, and then the war could resume? Write in the comments down below, and just after this we will move to the section where we spoke with American senators. They gave a press conference, and they've got something to tell after talks with Ukrainian delegation in Munich, so stay tuned and check for more. Greetings friends, Pavlo Shtelma here from the Intercontinental Hotel Kyiv, where three American senators, Mr. Tom Tillis, Ms. Shaheen and Mr. Barrett, arrived and gave a press conference to Ukrainian and international journalists. They've spoken about the aftermath of Munich Security Conference, the new security architecture that is obviously being formed right now and shaped by the American administration. Also, they've assured that there will be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine, after all that Ukrainian defenders have done at the battlefield. You will see more in our videos later on the channel, and right now in this format we will continue to report from the place of action.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are pleased to be here. We are a bipartisan delegation here deliberately because we wanted to show our support for Ukraine. As you heard, we were at Munich for the security conference, and we arrived this morning. We've had a very long, very productive day. We visited the energy site where the United States has helped Ukraine with investments to protect the energy grid so that it is not put out of service by Russian missiles or drones. I was very impressed with the ingenuity and the creativity and the speed with which that project was done. From there we went to Bucha. We saw evidence of the horrors of what happened in Bucha. We had the opportunity to meet with the mayor, with Father Andre, and with some of the citizens, and lay flowers on the memorial there in Bucha. We met with some of the officers who are collecting evidence to hold people accountable for those crimes, and then we had a chance to meet with some of the people who are developing the legal cases to hold people accountable. From there, we met with the UNHCR representative. We visited the site of the missile attack on January 1st and met with some of the folks in downtown Kyiv who lost their homes because of that missile attack. And while we were there, ironically enough, we heard the missile siren for missile attacks outside of Kyiv today. We then met with the Speaker of the Riyadh and had a very helpful and positive discussion with the Speaker. We talked a little bit about our support in the Senate for Ukraine. And then we went to the Yamani Children's Hospital and met with some of the patients there who were injured by Russian attacks, and talked to the staff, and of course saw the damage to the hospital. Throughout the day, we were very impressed with the resilience of the Ukrainian people, with the ingenuity and the effort to keep the economy and people going throughout this horrible war. And we're going to take back what we saw to our colleagues in the Senate to continue the support for Ukraine and for United States support for the country that are underway and ongoing. I believe, and I think I will let my colleagues speak also, but I believe that continued military support is in America's national interest just as it is in Ukraine's interest, because what we know is that Vladimir Putin is not going to stop at Ukraine, and it's important for us to not only let him know, but let the other adversaries of the United States who are watching this conflict very closely, whether it's Xi in China, whether it's the Iranians or the North Koreans, that we're not going to walk away from our allies, and that we think a positive outcome here in Ukraine is in America's interests as well.
Yeah, the only thing out of it, I agree with everything Senator Shaheen said. I think we came from the Munich Security Conference, and one of the discussions that we had, or several discussions we had in bilateral meetings, was the need for all of the NATO allies to get to the 2% threshold quickly. In the last 24 years, a result of not achieving that threshold is $2 trillion in modernization opportunities lost. Now we know that based on this conflict, that the United States and our NATO partner and allies need increased capacity and increased investment. That's a very important part of continuing to sustain the investment in Ukraine, which I think is absolutely essential, and we demonstrated that in our votes back in December to sustain another $64 billion. We have to continue to fight for that and ensure that pipeline continues.
And I would add that there's going to continue to be bipartisan support in the House and the Senate for the kind of military aid that you're talking about. It does benefit the United States of America. It benefits our economy, but we also benefit from the extraordinary ingenuity of the soldiers that are on the front lines of this battle in Ukraine against Putin. And we are learning from the work that they're doing as well. That's been very important.
The bipartisan group in Congress that supports Ukraine and a positive resolution believe that we are not going to see any kind of negotiated end to this war unless there are security guarantees that people feel comfortable about. We saw what happened in 2014 when Russia came in and we weren't tough enough. We saw the war start again in 22. We saw what happened in Georgia. And so I think those security guarantees could be done in a variety of ways. That's part of what this negotiation is going to be about. And I think the United States will have a role in that. I think Europe will have a role, but that's ultimately to be decided by any negotiation.
Again, I agree with everything that Senator Shaheen said. I believe, first, we should understand that this is just the beginning of a dialogue. There is no specific framework that's been mapped out yet, and we expect that will come to pass very quickly, we hope, and that Ukraine has to be front and center as a part of the negotiations to make sure that it's something sustainable. We have 52 nations involved in the Ramstein process. 32 nations are members of NATO. I think all of them could have a role to play in sustaining the peace and the reconstruction of Ukraine.
I would only add, I agree with everything that's been said, that what Ukraine has accomplished in this war already is extraordinary. Nobody would have predicted the success that Ukraine has had on the battlefield. And the result of that, it's been the result of cooperation between the United States and Ukraine and the United States and Europe. And that peace will never hold unless that collaboration continues after this war. Putin won't relent. And as Senator Shaheen said, he will just invade again unless he understands that there is a security guarantee that has teeth. And in my view, that's backed by Europe and the United States of America.
And listen, I think something that all of you know is that Ukraine has developed a very capable, very large army as the result of this war. And that's going to be critical as we think about going forward, how to ensure that Ukraine's security is guaranteed.
Critical minerals or materials, there are some 23 that are determined to be within Ukraine, some of that in the occupied territories elsewhere. That represents a great opportunity for the future revenue to rebuild Ukraine. And it should be a part of the discussion, and attracting businesses from around the globe who will invest and make that a reality. That is a long term. That's not an immediate play. That's not something that you derive value from this year or next year. That is a part of a long term agreement that clearly with that has to drive defense cooperation, defense guarantees. Very early stages. I believe that the Ukrainian the President Zelenskyy, and his advisors are taking a look at that. But again, it's very early. I believe that anyone that thinks that there's a set agreement that we either respond to or not are not involved in the negotiations. I believe that they have to move along, and this is a major consideration for some of the economic sources that are going to be necessary for reconstruction and economic recovery.
I think that, as Senator Tillis said, this is all early stages, and I, speaking for myself, but I think also for a majority of the people in the House and the Senate, and for the American people on this point, I don't think we believe any just peace can be reached without the participation and leadership of Ukraine, without the participation of Europe, and I don't believe that any agreement can be done behind Ukraine's back.
I think we all share that. It's important for Ukraine to be at the table. We heard that from President Zelenskyy as well at the Munich Security Conference. I just want to close by saying thank you all, and thanking our ambassador. Ambassador Brink has done an excellent job here in Ukraine, and we are very happy that she's here and look forward to continuing to work with her.
Senator Tillis, is there anything you can add on that last question?
Thank you, everybody. The bias in the question would be that that anybody would think that they wouldn't be. Of course they have to be at the table. There are thousands of people who have given their lives to defend this country. Does anybody really believe that the United States would negotiate an agreement with a European nation that's done what they've done on the battlefield, that's suffered what they have, and not be at the table? Of course they will. And you'll see that in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was all for today. Be sure to like, share and subscribe our channel to help us continue to deliver the news of the free world directly to you from Ukraine. It was Pavlo Shtermach from my home/field wrap-up episode. Stay tuned and don't let propaganda win.